What if I told you that some people get paid every single month without going to work? Not because they won the lottery. Not because they're influencers. And not because they're secretly rich. Imagine waking up tomorrow and seeing money deposited into your account while you were sleeping. Sounds too good to be true, right? Well, here's the crazy part. It's completely legal. Millions of people already do it. But most people never understand how it actually works. And even worse, many people think they need millions of dollars before dividend investing becomes useful. That's one of the biggest myths out there. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how people live off dividends, how much money you really need, the risks nobody talks about, and some surprising truths that most dividend videos completely ignore. And trust me, some of what you're about to hear might completely change the way you think about passive income. Most people trade time for money. You go to work. You get paid. You stop working, the money stops too. That's the system almost all of us grow up with. And there's nothing wrong with working. But there's a problem. Your income depends entirely on you showing up. If you get sick, if you lose your job, or if you simply want more freedom, your income can disappear. That's why so many people become interested in passive income. They want money that keeps coming in even when they're not actively working. But this is where most people get confused. When they hear passive income, they imagine overnight success. Fast money. Easy wealth. A lifestyle that looks more like a movie than reality. The truth is much less exciting. But it's also much more achievable. And that's where dividends come in. Imagine you own a pizza shop. At the end of the year, the shop makes a profit. You have two choices. You can reinvest the money into the business and help it grow. Or you can take part of those profits and distribute them to the owners. That's essentially what a dividend is. A dividend is money a company pays to its shareholders. If you own shares of that company, you receive part of those profits. But before we go any further, there's something almost nobody tells beginners. Most people think dividends are free money. As if a company simply rewards shareholders with an extra bonus. But that's not actually what's happening. Imagine your pizza shop is worth $100,000. At the end of the year, you take $5,000 out of the business and put it into your pocket. Did you suddenly become richer? Not really. You simply moved money from one place to another. And the same thing happens when a company pays a dividend. In fact, when a dividend is paid, the value of the company usually drops by roughly the same amount. That's why experienced investors don't buy dividend stocks because they believe the money is magically appearing. They buy them because of something much more powerful. Consistency, predictability, and a steady stream of cash flow. And that's where things start getting really interesting. Let's look at a simple example. Imagine you own investments worth $100,000. Those investments pay an average dividend yield of 4%. In simple terms, that means they pay you about $4,000 per year. You receive that income without selling your investments. Without touching the original amount. The investments continue to exist while generating cash. Now here's what many people do next. Instead of spending the dividends, they reinvest them. They use those payments to buy more shares. Those new shares generate more dividends. Those dividends buy even more shares. It's like planting a tree. Then using the fruit from that tree to plant more trees. Over time, the orchard starts growing by itself. But here's something that completely changed the way I think about dividend investing. Most dividend millionaires didn't become rich because of dividends. They became rich because their investments grew enormously over time. The dividends came later. Think about that for a second. Most beginners focus on the income. The people who actually succeed often focus on growth first. That's why many experienced investors care less about today's dividend yield and more about something called dividend growth. In simple terms, they don't ask how much a stock pays today. They ask how much it could pay 10 years from now. And history shows something fascinating. Some of the best dividend investments ever started with tiny dividend payments. Sometimes just 1%. Sometimes even less. But year after year, those payments kept growing. And after decades, they produced far more income than many high-yielding stocks that looked attractive in the beginning. This is one of the biggest misconceptions in dividend investing. The highest income today does not always lead to the highest income tomorrow. Now let's talk about the number everyone wants to know. How much money do you actually need to live off dividends? Let's say you want $40,000 per year in dividend income. And let's assume your investments generate a 4% dividend yield. To produce $40,000 annually, you would need roughly $1 million invested. That's the number that surprises most people. Living entirely off dividends usually requires a substantial portfolio. Not because dividends don't work, but because safe dividend yields are often lower than people expect. And before you think that's impossible, here's something important. Most successful dividend investors never start with the goal of replacing their entire income. Instead, they focus on replacing small expenses first. Imagine your internet bill costs $50 per month. That's $600 per year. If your dividend investments generate $600 annually, your internet bill is effectively covered. It may sound small, but psychologically, it's incredibly powerful. Because for the first time, your investments are paying for part of your life. Then maybe they cover your phone bill. Later your groceries. Eventually perhaps your utility bills. Little by little, your investments start carrying more of the financial load. Now here's something that surprised even researchers. One of the biggest advantages of dividends may not be financial at all. It may be psychological. Imagine the stock market suddenly drops 30%. Most investors panic. They watch their portfolio shrink and start making emotional decisions. But dividend investors often experience something different. Even while stock prices are falling, cash continues showing up in their accounts. The portfolio still feels productive. The machine is still running. And because of that, many dividend investors find it easier to stay calm during market crashes. Now don't misunderstand this. Dividends do not protect you from losses. A stock can still fall. A company can still struggle. But psychologically, receiving income during difficult periods often helps investors stay invested. And avoiding emotional decisions is one of the most underrated investing skills there is. Let's meet Sarah. Sarah is 28 years old. She invests $500 every month into dividend-paying investments. Nothing flashy. No chasing trends. No gambling on hot stocks. Just consistency. At first, the dividend payments feel tiny. A few dollars here. A few dollars there. Honestly, they seem almost meaningless. But Sarah keeps going. She reinvests every payment. 5 years later, the income is noticeably larger. 10 years later, it has become meaningful. 20 years later, the combination of regular investing, growth, and reinvested dividends has transformed her portfolio. Not because she found a secret. Not because she got lucky. Because she gave time a chance to work. Now let's look at a retired couple. They spent decades building their portfolio. They weren't trying to become rich overnight. They simply invested consistently over many years. Eventually, their investments generated enough dividend income to cover a significant portion of their living expenses. That's one reason dividends are so popular among retirees. The goal isn't necessarily luxury. The goal is freedom. Freedom from depending on a single source of income. Freedom to have more options. At this point, dividend investing probably sounds amazing. And honestly, it does have some powerful advantages. But if you only hear the benefits, you're getting an incomplete picture. Let's talk about the risks. Because this is where many investors get hurt. The biggest mistake is chasing the highest dividend yield. Imagine you see two stocks. One pays 3%. The other pays 15%. Most beginners immediately look at the 15% stock. Who wouldn't? It sounds incredible. But here's the catch. Sometimes a dividend yield becomes huge because the stock price has collapsed. The market is already worried. The business may be struggling. That's why experienced investors often say that the highest yield can sometimes be the biggest warning sign. Another risk is dividend cuts. Many people assume dividend payments are guaranteed. They're not. Companies can reduce them, suspend them, or eliminate them completely. And it often happens much faster than investors expect. There's also concentration risk. Some investors become obsessed with one company. They trust it. They love the brand. They believe it can never fail. History shows that's dangerous. Even great businesses can run into trouble. Diversification still matters. And then there's inflation. The silent enemy most people forget about. Imagine your portfolio generates $40,000 per year today. Sounds fantastic. But what happens 20 years from now if prices have doubled? The income might stay the same while your purchasing power shrinks dramatically. That's why many successful dividend investors focus on growing dividends, not just collecting them. Despite all those risks, dividend investing still offers several major advantages. It creates income without requiring you to sell shares. It can help investors remain calmer during market downturns. It creates a direct connection between owning assets and generating cash flow. And perhaps most importantly, it makes financial independence feel tangible. Instead of asking how much their portfolio is worth, many dividend investors ask a different question. How many of my monthly expenses are now covered by my investments? And that's a very powerful shift in mindset. There's one moment almost every long-term dividend investor remembers. The moment their investments generate more money than they're contributing themselves. At first, you're doing all the work. You invest $200, $500, maybe $1,000 every month. The dividends seem tiny, almost irrelevant. But eventually something changes. The portfolio starts helping itself grow. The dividends buy new shares. Those shares generate new dividends. Those dividends buy even more shares. And suddenly the snowball feels alive. Most people never experience this moment. Not because it's impossible, but because they quit during the boring years before it arrives. And that's perhaps the biggest secret of dividend investing. Success usually doesn't come from intelligence. It comes from staying around long enough for compounding to do its work. So here's the big takeaway. Living off dividends is absolutely possible. But it's not magic. It's not fast. And it's definitely not a shortcut to wealth. The people who succeed usually focus on patience, consistency, and long-term thinking. They understand that dividends are just one part of a much bigger process. The real goal isn't necessarily replacing your entire income overnight. The real goal is creating a life where more and more of your expenses are covered by assets instead of labor. And that's a powerful shift. Now I'm curious. If your dividends could pay for one monthly expense right now, what would you choose first? Your rent? Your groceries? Your phone bill? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video and want more simple explanations about investing, money, and financial freedom, make sure to subscribe. And check out the next video on screen right now, because understanding that next concept could save you years of expensive mistakes. Disclaimer. The content provided on this channel is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial, investment, legal, or tax advice. All opinions, analyses, and statements expressed are based on personal experience, personal research, and publicly available information and are subject to change without notice. No guarantee is made regarding the accuracy, completeness, or reliability of any information presented. Investing in stocks, cryptocurrencies, ETFs, or any other financial instruments involves substantial risk and may result in the partial or complete loss of capital. Past performance does not guarantee future results. Nothing on this channel should be interpreted as a recommendation, solicitation, or endorsement to buy or sell any securities or financial products. All investment decisions are made solely at your own risk and responsibility. Viewers should conduct their own independent research and consult with a licensed financial advisor, tax professional, or legal advisor before making any financial decisions. The creator of this channel assumes no liability for any financial losses, damages, or other consequences arising directly or indirectly from the use of the information provided in this content.